Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those very kind words, and thank you for hosting me today. It really is a great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to be here and to address the Sasakawa Foundation. You are an important contributor to research on the key issues affecting Japan and the region. And let me start, Mr. Chairman, by commenting on recent developments in the UK, which I know you were keen to hear when we had our discussion briefly. Following the EU referendum on 23rd of June, we have seen some major political changes in the United Kingdom. We have a new Prime Minister and a new set of ministers, and I, of course, am one of those. The referendum was the biggest democratic exercise that we have undertaken in a generation in the United Kingdom. And we gave the people a choice whether to remain a member of the European Union or to leave. I personally campaigned to remain in the European Union, but the British people made a different choice, to leave the European Union. And of course, it was a surprise to many of us, and there was some shock locally and internationally at the result because it was unexpected. But what has become absolutely clear is that our economy was well prepared and resilient. And in my meetings with businesses and foreign governments over the past 2 months, I have been struck by their pragmatism as they're beginning to grasp the opportunities Brexit will bring for bilateral trade and investment with the United Kingdom. And I know that some concerns have been expressed here in Japan about what might change when we leave the EU and what the effect might be on UK-Japan cooperation. I just want to say that the cooperation has been strengthening in recent years between our two countries. It now covers a huge range of activity, from trade and investment through research and innovation to security and defense. And Prime Minister Theresa May is determined to strengthen our cooperation still further. Her commitment to the relationship with Japan is absolutely clear. And Mr. Chairman, as you pointed out, she has already met with Prime Minister Abe twice since her appointment. And I am the 4th minister in Prime Minister May's government to visit Japan in the past 2 months. Japan matters very much to the British government, and Japan matters very much to the British people. Now, of course, there will be changes in some areas following our departure from the European Union, and I will address concerns about those in a moment. However, what I really want to focus on today are the many other areas where we cooperate and have the opportunity to do even more together in the future. But first, I want to set the referendum vote in context. The British people voted to leave the EU, but they did not vote to leave Europe. And the European Union is only one element of the UK's broad array of international commitments. All the others remain completely unchanged. And that means that we remain one of the world's leading promoters and defenders of values of freedom, democracy, and rule of law. We are a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We are the 6th largest financial contributor to United Nations peacekeeping. We are the 2nd largest contributor to NATO. And we are one of the world's biggest economies and a leading member of the G7. And of course, we're a leading voice in the Commonwealth and an active partner in the G20. After the vote on Brexit, we remain an outward-facing sovereign nation and a force for good in the world. We will continue to work tirelessly to promote and defend global peace, security and prosperity, and the rules-based international system. We have always been and continue to be a globally focused nation. We are Global Britain. When it comes to Asia-Pacific, we will continue to work tirelessly in the region. We've had relationships in this region for more than 4 centuries through our strong ties with Commonwealth countries and our historic links with Hong Kong, where the common law system and separation of powers are an essential British legacy. And in recent years, we have invested significantly in our new partnerships in Asia, including with the emerging powers of ASEAN, where we now have an ambassador or high commissioner in every single one of the 10 capitals. And of course, trade matters to the United Kingdom. We've always been a globally trading nation, but just as important is our cooperation with partners on defense, on counterterrorism, on counter-extremism, peacekeeping, on the international rule of law, and on human rights. And that is why we have been steadily upgrading our defense cooperation with Japan, which I will talk more about in a moment. It's why we continue to work with Indonesia and Malaysia to counter the threats of extremism and terrorism, and it's why we have supported domestic peace processes in Southeast Asia, in the southern Philippines, and in Burma, drawing on our successful experience of conflict resolution in Northern Ireland. And it's also why we have consistently spoken up for democracy in Burma and Thailand, highlighted human rights abuses in the region from Vietnam to China, and championed the rule-based trade and investment regime across the continent. As the only Western member of the P5 countries to have an embassy in Pyongyang, we have a close interest in the threat to international peace and security posed by North Korea. We co-sponsored Security Council Resolution 2270. Our Foreign Secretary publicly condemned the most recent North Korean nuclear test earlier this month. And I summoned the North Korean ambassador to the United Kingdom to the Foreign Office to deliver a very strong message from the British government. The North Korean regime's actions, including recent missile and nuclear tests, are of global concern. We will continue to work with Japan, South Korea, the United States, and other partners to ensure a consistent, robust response from the international community, including at the United Nations. And nor will we turn a blind eye to North Korea's human rights abuses, from the cruel abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s to the deliberate destitution of its own people today. Events in the last few weeks have provided further evidence of the North Korean regime's total disregard for the basic human rights of its people. Whilst the regime conducted their nuclear test, its people were suffering from devastating floods. The regime's restrictions on information and access hampered efforts by humanitarian groups to provide assistance or even to find out the full scale of the tragedy. So as with Japan, our engagement with Asia Pacific is underpinned at every level by our support for fundamental global values, including human rights, democracy, and respect for the rules-based international order. And we reject the proposition that Asia should operate according to a different set of rules or values to the rest of the global system. The South China Seas is a case in point. Britain does not take a position on individual sovereignty claims there, but we do take a view on how they are pursued, which must be in accordance with international law and internationally established norms of behavior. The UK opposes any actions which are likely to increase tensions in the South China Sea, including militarization. We urge all parties to exercise restraint, to pursue the settlement of disputes peacefully in accordance with international law, including the recent and binding decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration under UNCLOS, and to uphold freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight. These are points that we make to China, just as we do to other Asian countries. And we're able to do so because we are building a comprehensive global partnership with China, as the Prime Minister has recently reaffirmed during her attendance at the G20 meeting in China. We will continue to engage with China on bilateral economic relations and have recently reconfirmed Chinese investment in our new generation of civil nuclear power stations with a series of measures to enhance security. And because it is a global partnership, we will continue to build cooperation with China to address the most pressing challenges facing the international community today: climate change, violent extremism, humanitarian crises, antimicrobial resistance, nuclear proliferation, and where we disagree, we will continue to say so, including on human rights. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to focus on the special relationship between our two great countries, Japan and Great Britain. As I suggested earlier, one of the most important elements of our bilateral cooperation is our defense and security partnership. As our most recent strategic defense and security review stated publicly, Japan is the UK's closest security partner in Asia. We share the same objectives and cooperate together in many areas, in this region and, of course, further afield. We consider Japan a great asset to the UN Security Council, and we will continue to support reform that would see Japan become a permanent member. Our security cooperation is broad-ranging. We work together to frame the international response to North Korea's continued pursuit of nuclear weapons, including on a new UN Security Council resolution. We collaborate on counterterrorism and cybersecurity, and we cooperate on special forces training and landmine countermeasures in the Gulf. Last year, our two countries began a range of joint capacity building projects in Southeast Asia. And this included running our very first joint seminar to ASEAN member states on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, as well as working together to counter violent extremism in Indonesia. This year, we expanded our joint work into Africa, from demining in Angola to tackling terrorism in Tunisia. We're also working together in Sri Lanka, Burma, and Nepal to promote the involvement of women in post-conflict reconciliation. And this international cooperation is an exciting new aspect of our relationship and an area we hope will continue to grow. And there is plenty of scope to do more together in Japan too. For example, on non-combatant evacuation operations and on emergency response. In particular, we are willing to share our experiences of the London Olympics with the organizers of Tokyo 2020. We're already sharing our experiences about the Rugby World Cup ahead of Japan's hosting in 2019. And last year at the World Cup in England, Japan's brave blossoms stunned the world with their opening victory over a top-ranked South African team. And of course, Japan beat New Zealand in the Rugby Sevens at the Rio Olympics. And we hope Japanese rugby will continue to grow in stature and popularity ahead of 2019. In the field of defense, we are also working even more closely together. Over the coming months, you will see Royal Air Force Typhoon fighter jets exercising with their Japanese counterparts here in Japan. This will be the very first joint military exercise in Japan with a country other than the United States. And it will be a great opportunity for our forces to work together and build the personal links, mutual trust and understanding that help to underpin our security. We're also working together on important joint defense research, from developing specialized protective clothing to the JNAM high-capability missile project. Of course, the UK and Japan also share the view that prosperity and security are closely linked. We understand that our citizens can only be safe if we tackle the root causes of insecurity around the world. That is why I am proud that the United Kingdom is committed to spend 0.7% of gross national income on development assistance around the world and 2% of gross domestic product on defense. We are still the only OECD country to be doing both. And our cooperation also includes vital medical research. Japanese and British researchers are working together to tackle antimicrobial resistance. We both recognize the serious threat it poses to developed and developing countries alike. It is a threat that the international community must address, and we welcome Japan's leadership on the issue under their G7 presidency. As well as our security and research and development collaboration, we are also working together on commercial projects in the region. This year, these have ranged from supporting city planning in Burma and investment in Laos to high-speed rail in Malaysia. Cultural exchange is also an incredibly important part of our bilateral relationship. Some of you may follow our ambassador's Twitter account. Our ambassador is here today, when he releases a regular stream of twaikus, Twitter haiku poems in Japanese. Hopefully you've all been following this. If you haven't, please immediately follow the ambassador's Twitter account. And in return, of course, Japan has given the UK Baby Metal, who recently secured the highest ever UK chart ranking by a Japanese band. The important relationship between the royal family and the imperial household is a unique aspect of the close and very special ties between our people. And I'm particularly pleased that Prince William Park in Fukushima Prefecture, which Prince William visited last February as part of his tour of areas affected by the Great East Japan earthquake, has now opened. And we're proud that the UK is increasingly a destination of choice in the field of education. Today, there are around 15,000 Japanese students studying in the UK. It is only 154 years since the very first Japanese students to study in the UK defied the shogunate to travel to our shores. We hope they will be remembered next year as Japan prepares to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Meiji Restoration. To me, it is clear that UK-Japan cooperation is flourishing and that there is plenty of scope for our two countries to do even more together. I'm going to conclude shortly to allow time for questions, but before I do so, let me just say a few words about our trade and investment relationship. I know this is an area where Japan has expressed views about the possible impact of Brexit, and I'd like to share with you what I have been saying and what all of my ministerial colleagues have been saying to Japanese business leaders, both here and in London. We place great importance on our trade and investment relationship with Japan. We want that relationship to remain as strong as possible. We recognize Japanese investors' concerns, and we are listening to them. But we're also sharing with them our vision for the future and the many opportunities we see for the UK and Japan. I am confident about the future. I'm confident about the fundamental strength and attractiveness of the British economy, and I'm pleased that we continue to have a highly skilled workforce that embraces innovation. Most of all, I know that Britain is at heart a trading nation with a long track record of engagement and openness, and we will make Brexit a great opportunity for business and trade. And therein lies the opportunity for the UK and for Japan as we dedicated more time and energy to exploring new areas for our joint collaboration. I've also been making clear our desire to become the global leader in free trade, as Prime Minister May set out at the G20 summit. And I've been assuring with my colleagues, Japanese government and businesses, that we will continue to be a strong advocate for the EU's economic partnership agreement with Japan whilst we remain a member of the European Union. We hope it will be concluded by the end of this year. And finally, in these meetings, I am also stressing our appetite to strengthen and deepen cooperation across the full range of bilateral relationship into the future in the areas that I mentioned earlier. And I will end by saying this. The UK is leaving the EU. That means change in some areas. But our cooperation in Japan covers a broad range of fields which are unaffected by the UK's position in Europe. We value greatly this cooperation. We value greatly our special relationship. And we see opportunities to take it further in ways that will benefit both our countries. With energy and in great friendship and cooperation, let's seize those opportunities together. Thank you.